Nelson.
Here.
Hildebrand. Penquitz.
Here.
Binder.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum for a committee of the whole. Next item, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from July 30th, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, discussion on UTVs in the city of Plymouth. Tim, did you want to make any comments and then turn it over to Chief?
Yeah, I'm just going to make one quick comment and introduce Chief Ruggles, who's going to provide a rundown. Alder Penquitz requested this be on an agenda for discussion. I asked Chief Ruggles to do some research on this item and present to council his findings, giving that ATVs, UTVs are really a public safety road item. I wanted the police to have provide the information to council. So without further ado, Chief Ruggles.
Good evening to the council. Again, as a recent transplant to Wisconsin, I tried to give myself a crash course on the subject, so did the best we could in a few weeks here and hopefully provide some information to you. First and foremost, as you're probably well aware, ATV and UTV usage in the state of Wisconsin is on a dramatic increase. Reaching out to DNR, they actually, it sounds like they're up about to 500,000 almost registrations for these types of vehicles. It's almost a 20% increase over the past 5 years. So dramatic increases. Currently 7 of our 15 townships in Sheboygan County now approve ATV and UTV usage on the township roads. The most recent, of course, being Plymouth just voted this in. It is my understanding from Debbie over at the town of Plymouth that they're just waiting on Sheboygan County to respond as to which county roads may be exempt from that permission. The county has the right to not allow county highways to be ATV and UTV routes, and they're just waiting on Sheboygan County to respond in that fashion, and then they're going to move forward with allowing those vehicles on town roads. It is my understanding that they approved all town roads and are just waiting on the county to restrict highways. There are multiple villages, obviously, within Sheboygan County, too, that allow such vehicles: Adel, Cascade, Cedar Grove, Beulah, Random Lake, etc. So that is also being allowed in the smaller villages at this time. So what is an ATV or UTV? Real simple, there's a definition under Wisconsin statute. Simply being spoke, ATVs are the smaller of the two vehicles. It normally includes the 3-wheelers and the 4-wheelers that are commonly referred to as quads. They are designed, most importantly, the difference between an ATV, UTV, an ATV is designed where the rider actually straddles the vehicle and sits astride on it, as opposed to side-by-sides, which are in fact the UTVs, commonly referred to as side-by-sides. Occupants obviously sit side-by-side in the vehicle. Sometimes there's 2 seats, sometimes there's 4. The weights of these vehicles are a little larger on a UTV. Size, of course, is bigger. One point of note, if you'll remember in the 80s, the 3-wheel tricycle ATVs were very, very common. And then, of course, news articles and everything came out about the fatalities and the danger of these vehicles, their tendency to overturn. There was an actual voluntary ban placed on the major manufacturers by the U.S. Department of Justice. 1987 that occurred. They were quoted as being dangerous and unstable, and the ban went into place. The major manufacturers focused then on quads, which were not banned, and so therefore we still have those vehicles. That ban has since expired. Technically, the major manufacturers could start producing 3-wheeled ATVs again. We did find online that you can purchase brand new 3-wheel tricycle style ATVs from certain smaller companies, but the major manufacturers are focused now on the quads. Doesn't look like they're looking to go back to that. I think liability is the big concern there on those vehicles. So I think the major manufacturers saw the writing on the wall and they're focused now on the 4-wheel vehicles just because they tend to be safe. So again, moving on, there is a point of note here. It looks like, and we were hard pressed to find any difference to this, all the major manufacturers release these vehicles with owner's manuals and with tags on these vehicles that do state that they are for off-road operation and do not encourage, in fact discourage, the operation on paved surfaces. tendency to be that those paved surfaces, the vehicle responds differently and could be prone to a loss of control, collision, rollover, something to that effect. Those stickers come on every vehicle. Like I said, we were hard pressed. We cannot find any vehicle or any manufacturer that says doesn't have something to this warning effect on their vehicle when you buy it brand new from them. Currently, ATVs and UTVs are regulated by the DNR throughout the state of Wisconsin under Chapter 23. Most police officers are not trained specifically in Chapter 23. That is a DNR provision. Similarly, in talking to a DNR agent, they do not enforce local ordinance. And if we were to permit ATVs and UTVs on city streets, it would be by ordinance. DNR would not enforce that provision of law. That would fall solely to the police. Similarly, we would not necessarily enforce DNR. And if there are differences, we would have to keep that in mind as for enforcement. And that's the only reason I put that in here. Again, it's only allowed by ordinances. There is a section of 23 that states local ordinances cannot be more restrictive than the state statute, however. So we would have to keep that in mind when crafting an ordinance to allow these vehicles. We cannot be more restrictive than the state. And that may become key in some of these things we'll talk about here in just a second. If we allow UTVs, we must also allow ATVs per Wisconsin statute. You can't allow the smaller vehicles, the larger vehicles without allowing the smaller vehicles is the way it's written, so that's a provision. Again, Chapter 23, they are allowed to produce sound levels of 96 decibels. Just for point of reference, OSHA limit for continued noise exposure is 85. Our current city ordinance restricts loud and unnecessary sound, but does not have a decibel level. And again, restriction on, we cannot be more restrictive than state statute. I don't believe we can implement any kind of a noise ordinance that would regulate ATV and UTV. OWIs on ATVs and UTVs, operation while intoxicated, is a forfeiture only. There is no escalation of those penalties for repeated offenses that I could find anywhere. Also, violations of OWI on an ATV or UTV do not count like they do for other types of motor vehicles, so it would not escalate a motor vehicle offense then later on. Open intoxicants, however, an open alcohol container are allowed on ATV and UTV under state statute, so you can operate with a beer while you're driving an ATV or UTV. There are no driver's licenses required for the operation of an ATV or UTV. If you're born after 1988, you're 16 years of age or older, you need an ATV safety certificate. You can be 12 years of age as long as you're accompanied by an adult with that safety certificate and operate an ATV or UTV. DNR safety certificate is a 2-hour online course from what I found. Persons with suspended, revoked, or no Wisconsin driver's license may still operate ATVs, UTVs, even on public ways. And helmets are not required if you're 18 years or older. Seatbelts are required, however, on UTVs, not on ATVs. Obviously, ATV, you're sitting astride, no seatbelt on the vehicle. Moving on, so signage is another consideration. If we do allow ATVs, it is pretty clear that we have to post signage to such. I did find that we also have to, if we're restricting those vehicles from many routes, we would have to post those routes then specifically as ATVs, UTVs not allowed. All that signage must meet the manual and uniform traffic control device standards. I did find that there are groups out there that have donated the signage to other communities if they permit them. Some of the ATV associations and stuff in other locations have donated signs or made donation to help cover the cost of signage. But again, that's something, if we don't have such a in-kind donation, we would have to fund as a city. So, and they do have to meet certain standards even if donated. There were some updates in 2020 and 2021 to Chapter 23. They mostly dealt with equipment, headlights, taillights, the removal of the requirement for low pressure tires, things of that nature. And in 21, there was a rule about operation adjacent to the roadway and how dimming of headlights and things like that should occur to not interfere with motor vehicles. We reached out to Wisconsin DOT to get some crash data to look at. One of the points of note is unless there's an injury or fatality, it is not state law that you have to report an ATV or UTV crash. So we believe these stats are underreported where it comes to property only. Looking out to this, we obtained these numbers. This was the map was sent to us by the DOT representative, and we were told that we could access their public portal for the data. However, going through their public portal, we were unable to manipulate to just get down to the ATV, UTV data ourselves. When we reached back out to DOT to try to get some assistance, we haven't gotten a response yet, so I can't verify these numbers, nor can I manipulate them. These are as they were reported to us from DOT without the ability to refine them. However, the Wisconsin DNR does publish an annual report on ATV and UTV, so we looked at their crash data. As you can see, 48% there's an increase in fatalities if you look first at fatal crashes on all of the locations and then fatal crashes. Public roads, it tends towards the high 50s and 60s of fatal crashes, whereas private property and other locations take up less than that. Once we move on to the number of fatal crashes involving alcohol, it does look like that moves up to 48% as well. On the non-public roads, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read this over here. And then when you get onto the public roads, it's a 56%, if I read that correctly on the chart here. So there is an increase in alcohol usage and fatal crashes on public roads with ATVs and UTVs as compared to on all other properties. So it's just something we wanted to look at to see, knowing that there is in fact, like we said, the ability for open intox and some things of that. It's a concern possibly that in town might add another factor. So our concerns, first and foremost, parking. We're already looking at alternative parking locations in the downtown area with the expansion of the hotel downtowns and things like that potentially coming in the future. These vehicles could potentially, right now, a single ATV or UTV could take up an entire parking space. So that would restrict the number of parking spaces available to cars, especially in the downtown. That could be a concern. Again, something we would need to discuss in our ordinance when we craft it is can they be operated on parks, trails, bike paths, pedestrian walkways? Would kids be allowed to drive these to school? 16-year-olds could potentially, without a driver's license, drive one of these to school. And so that's something we should look at. Allowing persons without licenses, again, especially when we're talking about youth, if you haven't been through driver's ed, if you don't have the hours required to drive a vehicle, are you as familiar with the operation of other motor vehicles on the roadway? Would you potentially make some poor choices where it comes to turns or operation within traffic or things of that nature? Again, the crash data, I think, speaks for itself. There are some percentage increases on public roads. We receive currently complaints, I know council does also, about pedestrian conflict with vehicles, bicycles, scooters, all these other types of vehicles. Our concern in the police department would be if we had another layer, what would that impact be? These are additional types of vehicles that motorists would then need to look out for and understand how they're going to operate within traffic. We would also, again, need to invest in the signage, potentially some infrastructure changes, again, parking areas where the vehicles may conflict with motor vehicles, and we would have to actually come up with maybe some changes to certain streets or intersections. And of course, training for our officers to make sure they understand the DNR versus local ordinance things. Much of that training could be accomplished in-house, but there may be some classes we need to send somebody to just to make sure we have all of this figured out. Finally, again, the manufacturers don't suggest we operate these vehicles on paved surfaces, so most of our streets are obviously paved, there's curbs, there's things of that nature. We would be concerned with having people operate those vehicles against manufacturer regulations. And so again, while we understand that these vehicles are becoming more common, and it's clear that residents and people within Wisconsin want the opportunity to operate these vehicles, we're concerned with the crash data, the risk of injury, the risk of alcohol usage in those fatalities. And so when it comes to the police department, we're recommending that council not consider this at this time. But obviously there is the provision for that. If council would like to move forward on this, there are many other communities that have crafted ordinances already. I would suggest that we have a discussion about those ordinances, what sections, paragraphs, lines that you like from other communities that you would want to incorporate here. And if you choose to do that, would say we reach out to those communities and see what problems they've experienced with their ordinances, implementation, execution of those ordinances, and if they've learned anything that would help us. If there's any questions, I'll do my best. Again, crash course in it. I tried to stick to just the high points at this point, knowing we were a little short on time. So is there anything I can answer?
First off, Chief, thanks for taking the time to go through this and do a once-over highlight of things. Certainly, it's something that is present elsewhere in the state, and something that could come forward in the future. I personally have a problem with unlicensed people operating motor vehicles that travel faster than I can walk, and what the insurance industry is going to do with that, but that's not our problem at this point. So thank you for bringing it forward, and any comments or discussion points can certainly be funneled through the administrator's office, and we can look at this as kind of a opportunity, but at the same time, it's part of risk management. So thank you for that. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn so we can get ready for our council meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
We actually have 3 levels of traffic already. One is foot traffic. Lots of people walking, lots of people biking. There's another level, you got lots of people driving. And you got the e-bikes added. That population is going to increase.